Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris and Lance Albertson. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there everyone, DMO73 here, back after another long week of Force of Will, including a Grand Prix with The Teacher's Lounge, your podcast talking about all things Force of Will, with, as always, Ryan Miles. Woohoo! Brandan Bremont.
Hey ya.
Frank Closser.
I'm back.
And this time, I will be stepping out, and I will be replaced by the one, the only, Aaron Miles.
I'm Aaron.
Boo. So, with that, I leave you guys to it. You are in their capable hands, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Teacher's Lounge. Take it away, boys.
What's going on, Forceful players? Ryan Miles here with the Teacher's Lounge and whatnot. I wanted to hijack like my intro. You know what I'm
I've been promoted.
I thought you were about to say with another episode of the Daily Mileage.
Well, we got Aaron in here, so we're gonna see how
this is actually a Daily Mileage podcast. You've all been fooled.
Yeah.
Right.
So first topic I think we want to talk about here is we did get some news over the past week with the invitation to Valhalla, invitation to New Valhalla, I think is the set they're calling it. Whatever it is, it's the New Valhalla stuff. So we got 10, I guess, tribes you want to call it. 2 of each color, and they've all got a very generic, description of what the tribes are going to be doing, and then like we also got art for the ruler, which is really the most important part. So kind of just want to talk about them generically. I don't want to go through all 10, but if we just kind of go around the room and then say which one's our favorite and why it's our favorite, like what is the name of it, what does it do, why is it your favorite, do that kind of thing. I think that'd be enough to like get the gist out there. So Aaron, you're new here, why don't you go first, buddy?
Alright, so I really wanted my first one to, my favorite one to be the Knight's Castle in the Sky Round, because I've always been a fan of Machines and Machina and Arthur and all that, but it's blue, so I can't pick that. So the best one is Bottomless Chasm of Death, the Abyss. And it's really because I feel like Force will throw all creativity out the window on this one. The Abyss's chief, his name is Hell, and the ruler is Lich. And like that's just as generic as they can get, but Forcewell has always done a great job with their art, putting things like this over the top. So I'm really excited to see the art that comes out of that. I don't know what this tribe does because I have not read any of these, and I looked at them for the first time 2 minutes ago.
They look to be some sort of grindy, dredge-esque tribe.
Hell yeah!
They have low fighting power, but keep coming back from the dead.
I have a Japanese demonic that I'm ready to go.
There you go.
You picked correctly right off the bat. My turn.
There you go.
So, my favorite is Moonlit Paradise, Lunar Heaven. Their chief god is Zeus, and their ruler is the were-rabbit Adam Seacart. None of that's important, because they have angels, and that's all that's relevant here. Big flyers that are difficult to block, although I assume that's just because they have the keyword flying.
Yeah, that's usually how that works.
Special second is the Mechanical Knights of the Round, because I don't care if they're blue. They're a +1/+1 counter tribe that's cyborg knights, and I'm all over that. But I'm fully ready for them to somehow be terrible and only get to play them at locals.
I think the less playable the color, the more excited Frank gets. So this is what I expected: blue and white. There you go.
Does sound accurate. I'm going next.
You take back what you said about planes, sir. I'll fight you.
My favorite one of these tribes is the Village of the Spirited Away Kuga. It's one of the green tribes. No, it can't be. There's no Y.
Koga.
Kagua.
Koga?
No, it's actually
All right,
Koga. 100%, guys.
So my only explanation for why this is my favorite tribe are the first 6 words of the explanation of this tribe. The main race is cat ninjas. And the art that they put out is this incredible looking cat ninja thing, big old shuriken. It's all Naruto-esque. It's great. This tribe looks incredible. I'm very excited for it.
You see, the second sentence of that paragraph, the first 8 words, is why I hate this tribe, and it says, in general, Hanzo is a good balanced ruler. And Hanzo is not good or balanced in anything, so I'm not a fan.
Also, it says the jack of all trades but master of none, which is, there's no way that comes out wrong.
So that's just reflect refrain all over again. Oh boy.
Scheherezade is a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Scheherazade's a master of winning games.
Reflect is a jack of all trades and a master of none.
My favorite is the cleverly named Ruins of Never-Ending Ruin, Rain Ruin. Basically, it's just the discard tribe, and I love discard. I like making my opponent have no hand. When Fox first came out, I was super excited to play Lapis's Darkstorm and Heavenbound Pheasant and Manticore, and then just on like turn 2, discard my opponent's hand, and then also play like Heavenbound Pheasant and make a mana core, so when they drew a card for turn, they would have to discard it, and I would just do that forever, and that was my favorite thing I think I've ever done in Force of Will. So this faction excels at hand disruption, aiming to whittle away your opponent's choices, and then that's just what I want to be doing. So I want my opponent to have no cards, so I have to think less about what they could have, and then I get to do stuff. So Ruins
Are
of
you
Never
down to
Ending
play
Rain,
Emo Lucifer as your ruler?
What is it?
The art. Its ruler is Lucifer, its primary god is Satan, and the art that they presented is definitely Emo Lucifer.
Awesome. Yes, that is exactly what I want to be doing. I'm just going to play zombies and stuff. I'm going to play Satan and Lucifer, and he's hell itself. Cool. Awesome. This
Yeah,
is
dude,
why we're
every
brothers,
time I try to build a cool deck, Ryan just builds a cooler deck that counters it. I hate him.
Wait, how does a discard deck counter a deck that just gets its stuff back?
Because
in the
he's going to be
graveyard
like, there's going to be some card that they play. He's going to play like the red-black Valentine and be like, wow, 4 Evil Elemental Uprising is really good in my main deck. And I'm going to be like, oh man, why?
Yeah, I guess that is a problem. They're pitching this like dredged like revival archetype, and Evil Elemental Uprising, whether or not Sherry stays legal, is still going to be a card that will be in at least sideboards. So
Okay,
sorry about your bottomless chasm of death, AJ.
Oh.
To be fair, that does also give them some like actual wiggle room to like do something cool with the tribe if there's already a bullet in the format against it. Like we
Right,
went
but
through
I don't
several
necessarily
formats.
know if I want Force Will's design philosophy to be like, well, there is one card that counters this, so we can just make the most broken tribe ever. Like, because we might have to play this as cluster at Worlds, and so.
Oh my! I hope so.
I am a little worried about dredge type stuff if as long as Life-Stealing Altar exists. I think that is a card that's very
true.
powerful for this kind of strategy. And I would be a little bit worried about that becoming a little over the top.
So there's one of my favorite cards of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a card called Card of Safe Return. Are any of you guys familiar with that card?
Yes.
No.
So
No.
it says anytime you special summoned a monster from your graveyard, you drew a card. So anytime like a monster went from your graveyard to the field, it would be like a continuous addition that says draw a card. And I'm just imagining that with like Demonic Dead and Life-Stealing Altar, and I can just pay 500 life to draw a card whenever I want, and that just excites me a lot, and I hope that happens, and at the same time I don't. So.
Alrighty, well these look really cool. You can go on the Force Will main website and just look up the article, Your Invitation to New Valhalla Part 3 if you want to see these rulers, and a lot of great art. The art, you guys agree that the art is like stunning on so many of these.
Yes.
I'm a very big fan.
Yes, all of the art for this cluster excites me, including is this Cheshire Cat or is this Valentina?
It's 100% Loki. It's like literally in the text,
I know.
right?
You know that
Okay.
I know.
Alright.
So next topic is going to be AJ and I really wanted to talk about Outer Worlds Scheherezade deck. So Brandon, if you want to start
does
this one
anybody have
off,
a link for this?
What's Outer World?
I'm looking one for right now.
I don't have it pulled up.
I'm gonna pull it up right now. But Brandon, if you want to talk about it, you kind of like helped build it at least a little
Yeah,
bit, right?
sure. So, I mean, this Scheherezade deck, it's very similar to the old Scheherezade deck that we played before, with before the banning, with the major addition of Dollmaker. So this Dollmaker card, if you guys don't know what it does, it's 2 mana for a 6/6 that says whenever a doll enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card, and if you have Legend 3, it gives dolls +2/+2. It does a lot of the work of the old Sherry deck that... the old Cherry deck that had Ruin Story and Genie, whittling down your cards and then eventually overpowering you with huge card advantage engines like Jin and Ruin Story looping the extra deck. Well, now if you just have a doll maker on the field, all of your dolls replace themselves, so they kind of generate card advantage that way, and it keeps the deck doing a lot of what the old deck did. It did pretty well. We put Alex and Jalen and Joe in top 8 with it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
the deck is so much like the old deck. It's kind of hard to even talk about any differently. Like if you remember how Scheherazade's been dominating the format recently, this deck is kind of the next iteration of that after the ban list. It's the best mid-range deck. It's the best control deck. It's the best aggro deck. It's a very oppressive list. I don't think it's quite as tier 0 as the last one was, but I still think it's probably best deck in format.
I'm trying to see if I can find the deck list. So I'm like searching the US group, and I can't.
I
seem to
found
find
one.
it.
Frank Closser posted it on June 30th, so if you just search for his name, because I'm looking at Alex's deck right now.
Gotcha. So one of the things I was concerned, you guys played like 4 Sacred Elf and like 3 Tamas, right?
Right.
So like my
so you're about to tell me that you don't think Tom is good.
Well, first of all, I don't think Tom is good, but I feel like 4 Sacred Elf is also like a pretty high number, and it felt like if you're trying to win the Scheherezade mirror, you're not really trying to play like this aggressive tempo thing. And not only do I think that like Tama just doesn't, like, instead of playing a 40 card deck, you're playing like a 36 card deck, and that's not really what I feel like you want in Scheherezade mirrors. Like, I think one of the reasons that yeah, go ahead.
There's a few things that Tama does. First of all, it pops Zero's barrier, so it replaces itself, and then if they flip Ray, you get to pop the Ray barrier and then do something else with it, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on. Point me to the card in the deck that is the something else that you're doing to the Zero, because I can't find it.
Yeah.
So
Last Days of the Doll, right?
There's nothing else.
Last Days of a Doll, Scarlet's Agony.
But, like, you want to pop off a Tama to remove the barrier for Scarlet's
There
Agony?
you go.
That's kind of, like, what I was going for. Like, I understand the Tama if you are playing, like, you know,
if you were, like, main
decking
the miscalculations and you were maining, like, the 4 white stones, then I'd understand it a bit more, but, it just seems like a really weak line of logic.
Well, now I'm going to back up on the fact that I didn't play this deck here, so I'm speaking secondhand for people that I tested with and talked to, like, quite a bit. Tama's just always seemed good. I mean, it's just the ability to replace itself for very low cost, to have a blocker. Sometimes it just gets damage in that makes their final battles more awkward. It's just such a low cost to include in your deck. So you want to keep the deck as close to 40 as possible. I'm looking at Joe's deck.
I'm going to assume, for argument's sake, that it's the same as Alex's. Alex played 40.
Yeah,
I don't think they're all the same yet. Joe had 1 extra card, but Alex and Jalen both had 40. I don't actually know what the 1 card difference is.
I think it's the last audience or something.
Knowing Joe Ray, it's some extra cancel spell, 100%.
Sure, something like that. But it's the kind of card that's just such a low cost to include. I think it's just great in most green decks. The Sacred Elf, on the other hand, I'm a little bit more skeptical about. You saw that Jean-Paul, the eventual winner, decided not to play it, and he was talking about how it's a bad play past turn 1. It's really bad to draw off the top, and the first few turns aren't really what matters in Scheherezade mirrors anyway, since you're going to both go late enough to try and fight over each other's doll makers, that Sacred Elf just ends up being a liability more than anything else. And John Paul's list was more tuned to beat Scheherezade mirrors and kind of scrapped some of the other matchups, which I actually think was the correct call for the format anyway. So that one's more up in the air, but I still like Tama.
So we actually, Ryan, more to our point, you and I had a Scheherezade deck, Team ARG, and we talked a lot with Zach Tufford, and Zach actually gave the deck that we had helped him build to Stephen Holsheiser, who also got top 8. And his list looks a lot different. I don't know if you knew that. Stephen was playing essentially the deck that we made with Zach.
I personally would have cut down to 3 Sacred Elf, just because, like Brandon was saying, that Jean-Paul was saying, it's just like a card you want to see turn 1, but not one you want to see later.
Yeah.
I did find the 41st card in Joe's list. It is just a Rapid Growth, which is, I think, super good because it does mess up the final battle math. But, like, it just feels like there are very key cards that blow out the Scheherezade mirror, and it's cards like the Rapid Growth to beat the final battle. It's cards like Winds of Salvation, you know, extra copies of Final Battle just to, like, help, you know, have, like, see it with more frequency. And even, like, extra copies of Patrolling Guard Doll just because it's your biggest card in your deck, right? Like, these are... And then discard, right? So there was 2 Thought Control in Outer Worlds list. Stephen Holsheiser's list played 4 Glint of Insight, and then even Jean-Paul had discard just in the form of the Blazer. But, like, the thing that I thought was super important going into this tournament was that if I was going to play Scheherezade, like, I could play almost any version I wanted blindfolded, and I would top 8 the tournament. But if I want to actually win the tournament, which, you know, Joe is going for his invite, Jalen's going for his invite, like, you have to be aggressive about targeting Scheherezade mirrors and just hope that your natural player skill will get you to the top 8, even against, like, the matchups that you're quote-unquote stacking.
So, I 100% agree with that sentiment, and I think that's fundamentally the reason why John Paul ended up winning. But, I mean, that's all there is to it. There's no but about it.
I was wondering where the but was going. I was very curious.
There was no but. That is just accurate. In the future, I think that some of the cards that John Paul chose that were incredible was Shade Envoy of Darkness, which is like... Yes. Ooh, when the other 2 weeks ago we were talking about the big winners out of the True Blade ban, and I said, like, John d'Arc, which just seems ridiculous now. Shade Envoy. How did we not talk about that? Like, that card is just woo.
So the problem with Shade Envoy is that it still dies for 1 mana against the Keurig decks, because, like, we were thinking Heaven Thundering Dragon Palm was like the big problem there.
But I think we just beat the Keurig decks anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that kill Dollmaster with that.
Yeah,
feels
Alex
amazing.
randomly got everybody really on the wrong side of the fence on the Scheherezade Keurig matchup. I know talking with him leading into the events of Collinsville, he was saying that Keurig was the only deck that he was afraid of a Scheherezade, and I think that the Outer World deck very much overcompensated for that matchup when it wasn't actually as much of an issue as it is.
Yeah, potentially. And again, this is just faults in playtesting sometimes.
This is what you get for relying on Alex.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Your dreams crushed.
Alex does a lot of
foreigners winning your Grand Prix.
Yeah, that was as soon as I saw the deck list.
Hey, where were you guys? Where were you guys stopping them? Come on.
I gotta have back surgery in like a week, so.
Oh, I wasn't stopping anything. I enabled all
I'm hearing
this.
excuses.
Half your team was rolling with my cards.
Frank, you should have stopped him. Why were you judging? Come on, man.
Yeah, come on.
I was so close to flying out there with a janky tree 2 list, man. I was this close, and I guarantee you I would have won the whole tournament if I'd done it. Shade doesn't do anything against me.
Because when we first set out the schedule this season, I got the chance to take Atlanta and was like, oh, Frank can be the alpha and omega of judges this season, and that's a made-up title I can take onto myself. And then they rescheduled Denver and stole my title.
Oh, no.
No. Disaster.
Yeah, so overall, I was hoping for America to, like, clinch out this GP, and I was just, like, a little bit disappointed with the deck list, because, like, we do expect, you know, Outer World to be one of the best teams in the country, and, like, we are happy to see them all in top 8. I think the only person who went that didn't top 8 was Rick Jennings, right?
Zach Smithson was there, too, I believe.
Gotcha. And it was, like, I
and they were
definitely
both
felt like
pretty
you
on
guys...
the border.
Or not you guys, but like the team underestimated their own skill level. Like you guys, like they could top with any Scheherezade list. So like really make sure you're trying to beat the mirror there. And it was just a crazy list. So this kind of brings us to our next topic, right? Which is Europe versus North America. And I want to start this by just saying that I think Europe is kind of ahead of us right now, and that was like evident at this event because like. You go into the event, and I think like the prevailing mindset is okay. Like, trust your player skill, and like make sure that your deck is ready to beat like the mirror because that's what you're going to play in the finals of the event. And the only player that seemed to have done that was the European that came across the the sea to come kick our asses basically. So like how like looking at the deck list from this event, the deck list like the cluster deck list that we saw from the Europe event was another thing. I don't know if you guys have seen those lists, but these are like super refined lists in cluster. Like the Gil list that Federico played, like 45 cards, 14 stones, and nothing feels out of place. Like you can play more cards in the deck because you don't want to draw as many of your like bad elementals. You want to see your leaf paladins. You have hyper searchability. All of your stones are relevant because we play Magic Stone Analysis. It's just something that like takes a lot of iterations of refining, I feel, to get to that point. And then on the other side of the table of the finals was like a super refined time-spinning witch deck where you're not even relying on Mosasaurus as much. You're relying on like Misty and like just getting off like Lorite triggers and like hitting people in the face a bunch of times. And most crucially, they're playing the Speaker Stone, which has barrier. So like they think that Mosasaurus time-spinning witch is going to be the best deck, and they came prepared for that with like Speaker Stone in the stone deck instead of Spirit Magic Stone, just recognizing like what the format was going to be. And it took me like a couple days to look at that deck and be like, I have no idea why they were playing Spirit Magic Stone or why they weren't playing Spirit Stone. I'm like, oh my god, this card has barrier. That's like actually insane. So like the deck building just from like that tournament versus the deck building from the American players in this tournament, and then having it won by a European, like definitely makes me feel like the strong European players are like putting their stamp on the world, and we're kind of falling behind.
So I think a lot of that is since the beginning of the season and the announcement that ARGs would be giving out unpaid invites to the World Championship, I think the American pro scene got extremely lazy, right? Like there's the same 8 players that you see topping every event. Like at the beginning of the season it was OTG versus Outer World, but if you saw the list of players at the event, you could pretty much guess who the top 8 was going to be, or at least 6 of the top 8 players, right? And then you get the ARGs having unpaid invites, and all of a sudden it's like, oh well, now like we have these very small events giving out Worlds invites. Like American players became more about getting their friends World invites than they did winning events. And I think they got complacent in that. They're like, oh, we can just stomp any GP we go to. Like, I know that Outer World's plan was to get Jalen the invite this weekend. Alex scooped his top 8 match to him, I believe. And it's just that kind of mentality of like, oh, I'd rather see my friend at Worlds than win another event is not a sentiment that the European players share, from my understanding. And maybe they do, but even if they do, they play more rounds than us. They cut to a top 16. It's a little bit easier for them to like scoop to a friend in Swiss, and you know, still top the event. Whereas we're just throwing away our wins left and right, trying to get our people that we know into top 8 instead of Europeans have a lot of like mid-level players that are hungry and they want those event invites. They want to go to the World Championship. They want to earn their spot at the big boy table, and they go for it. I don't think we have anybody like that in America. You're either on a team, or like you're friends, you're like good friends with a pro player, or you just don't exist. Like we don't have any mid-level hungry players that are out here like grinding, going to their locals every week, trying to build a new deck, trying to show us up, or like accepting that the best deck is the best deck and bringing that to an event with the intention of winning.
Brandon, Frank, you guys have any thoughts on this?
So did either of you catch my my comment on John Paul's post he made on the US page on Sunday?
I did not.
Yes, I did. But
so basically, what I said was it's not really fair to judge John Paul winning this event by an event so late in the season, right? Because most of those players that you were talking about that consistently top events didn't really show up. I mean, you had Nick and Alex there, which are, of course, two very good players. Alex was in top and scooped it to Jalen, and Nick didn't even play the best deck because he already had a paid invite, didn't really care, and forfeited those Sherry cards to other players. So, I mean, it's just so... And if Nick had really cared, if Alex had, cared more to not be scooping to Jalen, would we have seen more competition? Maybe so. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier about how American players, we have very good American players, they just get lazy after the first few events. So like GP Atlanta was earlier in the year, of course. It was one of the first events of the season when very few people actually had invites. I mean, let's read off the top 8 list for this. It was first place was Aaron Miles, second place was Joe Ray, third was Ryan Miles, fourth place was me, fifth, and then like we had Tyler Tompkins, who's like, and Toby Cuevas. I'm sorry,
Toby Cuevas.
Butchered that.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Driz Foskin. Sorry, I'm not very good with last names, but and Andre DeMorin. Like that's 8 people. Like maybe besides Tyler would be the only one that most people wouldn't know, but like otherwise these are all known people that like generally top a lot, and so like it's just this event being so late. I don't really pull any information from that. I don't think that this event can conclude that the Europeans are better deck builders than us. I think a lot of what Ryan says is correct. I think they try harder throughout the entire season over there, but I don't know if that necessarily makes them better players.
On the deck building, I would also like Atlanta's another good example of the difference in season. So like in Atlanta, we had just come off of several months off. The biggest thing we'd had, like at least as far as like results for most American players to see, was like one ARG in
Connecticut.
One ARG in the middle of somewhere or other. And then immediately, Outer World all comes on the same list that is literally, from what I can tell, no one called. All of your team is on a very refined Lumia list, and all of them perform extremely well. And then now we're in the end of the season, and I would also blame possibly some of the other laziness just on the fact that it's the end of the season, and with them needing it less, they didn't care as much about having the best Sherry list because they knew a Sherry list would get like so for example, Blandon's goal was simply get into top 8 and then maneuver favorably in top 8 to help out Jalen so that he could get cards that he could sell for money and then help Jalen. And the list he had accomplished both of those goals, and he clearly, once he reached something that does that, just stopped because that was the end of the effort he wanted there.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I know. Back to Bremont's point, I know that you said that, like, because it is such an event late in the season and because John Paul won, we can't necessarily say that the Europeans are, like, better players or better deck builders than us, but at the same time, like, we don't have the evidence to back ourselves up here.
Like, I just don't think there's evidence either way.
Like, I'm not... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I mean,
I just don't think we don't have a good sample in any direction here. You can't say the Europeans are better. You can't say Americans are better. The only thing that's going to conclusively decide that is who gets more top spots at Worlds, and that's clearly going to be the U.S. players. So the Americans are better.
Yeah, as long as we're not drafting, I think that's gonna that's gonna feel good. Like
if we're drafting, we're still going to win.
No, if there's no draft, I'm back in, baby. I'm full power.
I mean, like, I definitely think that John Paul is, like, probably a top 5 player in the world, like top 3 player in Europe, so it's not surprising to me that he comes over here and, does extremely, extremely well. But just the fact that, I just felt like he was going to win just from looking at the top 8 lists because he came more prepared to the tournament. And it just kind of, it's demoralizing, I guess, because you want to have, like, a banter back and forth with Europe. You want to build hype for Worlds. But then, like, they just send one person over, and then Ben Bargetzi just wins Canada. Like, I was at that event. I made a completely incorrect deck choice, and I'm like, all right, that was
I mean, Alex went over to an event earlier and got second. I mean, it's not like it doesn't go both ways. When you put someone that is in this like upper echelon of players into a large group, they are very likely to do very well. I mean, it doesn't say very much about either of the European scene or the American scene.
I guess
like if we were to put Aaron over just in a random 150-person European event, I think he's very likely to win or get second. And it doesn't really say anything in that case either.
No, that's fair. I just wanted to bash on you guys for playing Tama a little bit more. No, but I'm kidding. Well,
sure. I guess one of the things
you guys, why exactly am I in this group out of curiosity?
If we could just send an American that isn't Alex Blandon to Europe, I know we can do it. Just send literally anybody else.
To add more fuel to the completely unverifiable fire, there's another factor in sending someone overseas that is, like, a little different, and that's there's a certain amount of this game that is reading your opponent, and I can tell you from watching them, no one was used to like John Paul's mannerisms. No one could read him like that, and I would almost guarantee you that when Blandon goes over doing his wild, if you've seen him at an event doing his wild Blandon movements, no one over there is going to know what the hell that means.
That's fair.
Like,
Blandon is a
there
wild card
is that aspect that like some of us get used to reading, like especially among the players who see each other a lot. You get used to reading some of them and reading some of their tells, and like when all of a sudden you throw in this wild card who is very skilled, all of those tells are gone, and that also has a mental a certain amount of menace to it.
That's true.
So I think that goes both ways, though. So like speaking as someone who went down to Mexico and played in the Mexican GP, I felt like some of my opponents were nervous to play against me, maybe just because I was American or for whatever reason. But I also had a really hard time reading people in Mexico too. So
yeah,
I think it's a balancing act.
Agreed. I'm not saying it's definitive one way or another. I'm just saying it's a factor in why it's hard to compare from just a sample size of we've had like 2 or 3 European players come over and play in some GPs. We've sent people over there like 3 or 4 times.
We've sent Alex.
We've sent Alex 3 times. They have sent Bargetzi, David Hartley, and John Paul.
Yep.
So I think they're 2 for 2 on winning because Hartley has not won any, and he came over twice.
Yeah, but Hartley's on our team, and we gave him a deck, so that just makes us look worse. Like the 2 Europeans playing European decks come over and cream our events. We take David Hartley. 3 of us top the event with the Lumia deck, but the European doesn't make it. So
I think a part of that might actually have to do with local meta, because I guarantee that John Paul didn't really like test with any Americans extensively before he came over. Whereas like whenever we send Alex tests very heavily with the Italians.
That's probably it. Alex is being watered down by Europe when he goes over. He could be winning these events. That makes a lot of sense.
I don't think Alex could win the events. I think he's too much of a monkey, but...
All right, so next topic I want to talk about is, like, we are talking about the top 8 and the deck lists that were played, but I made a post in the US group earlier, yesterday, Saturday, one of these days, talking about how out of the top 8 decks, right, we have 6 Scheherezade decks. 3 of them are on Outer World. One of them is John Paul. One of them is Derek M. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. He looks a lot like Kyron Lucas. And then Steven Holsheiser. And then the other 2 decks that were in top 8 were Andrew McIntyre playing Keurig, who got second at Minneapolis with Keurig, and Joseph Bowling on Gil, I believe. So
yes,
you look at the top 6, the top 8, right? Out of the Scheherezade lists, Jean Paul topped with Scheherezade at the Wanderer event. Alex won an event with Scheherezade. This is Jalen's first top this season, but he is a pretty known player. Joe Ray has topped with Scheherezade and also topped before that even. Derek topped with Scheherezade at Minneapolis as well. And then Steven Holsheiser topped something, I think.
Yeah, I think this is like the third or almost fourth time we've seen Steven Holsheiser's name in top 8, I believe.
Jalen topped Minneapolis earlier this year on Lumia.
Yeah, Jalen topped with Lumia. So like these are players that are GP topping players, right? Like they're all consistently like known. Some of them more than others. Like and other of them like have their first tops this season. In Derek's case, Andrew McIntyre, like he kind of came out of nowhere at Minneapolis, just like this guy playing Keurig, but then he comes back again playing Keurig, and like clearly this is the Keurig guy. He's the only guy to top with Keurig in the GP, I think, in North America, and he's done it twice now. So like obviously
there were 2 Keurigs in the Minneapolis top. I'm sorry,
you're
correcting
correct.
you, but they're going to keep going.
Yeah, so like this guy knows this deck and has now piloted to top 8 in a Scheherezade meta twice. And then the one random, right, the one guy who snuck out of the entire field and who's never taught the GP, came out of nowhere. He's not playing Scheherezade, which we're all saying is the best deck. He's not playing Keurig, which is like the number 2, but like only good if you get good breakers. He's playing Gil, which I think is honestly one of the hardest decks to pilot. So like is that a viable deck that is so good that someone who's never like had a force of will career can just play it to a top 8? Like, what makes us so convinced that Scheherazade's the best deck, or are we all just kind of like circle jerking it and being like, man, Scheherazade's the best deck, we all have to play Scheherazade, and then, oh look, we all topped with Scheherazade, but like, we're all playing Scheherazade, we're all the good players, like, you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, so what you're saying is ultimately a little bit intelligently nihilistic, right? Like, can we ever really know? I mean, if all the good players are playing the same deck, then that's going to look like the best deck. I mean, but what you're saying is also just there's no conclusion. We also just we'll never have the sample size to truly conclude that. Like, the Gil player, he could have literally dodged Scheherazade all day. I mean, it's possible that he never played Scheherazade, made top 8, and now this deck looks a lot better than it actually is. I mean, the Carrick player has done it twice now. That's a pretty good sample, but even then, even just 2 is not enough to conclude anything. And so, ultimately, the answer is we can never really know. Like, who knows?
I mean, like, so I think one of the problems is, like, a lot of the pro players have condensed down onto Team ARG now, because we know that, like, Alex is still going to talk to Outer World. If, like, ARG and Outer World were to go to the same event, I would expect most of us to be on the same deck, whereas back in Atlanta, you know, going back to that, like, Outer World and OTG were very separate teams, and we showed up with 2 very separate decks. And I don't think that's something that you're going to be seeing out of an American GP for a while again. Is like this division within the pro players on, like, what is the best deck.
The other difference comparing to Atlanta is, remember, Atlanta was our first GP after a rotation. And so there was a certain amount of unknown, whereas here, we're our first GP after a banning, but a banning that everyone almost immediately agreed just took Sherry down a peg.
Like, well, it was a banning and a set release, and the set had a lot of new Gil cards in it.
Well, but the set also had new Sherry cards in it.
It had 2 of them. They just happened to be really fucking good.
They just happened to be, like, immediately max copies in all of the Sherry decks.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, like, I was thinking about main decking a copy of Seed of Rebirth.
Yeah. And, like, on stream and in the interview, you can actually hear John Paul say that, like, he would play a 5th of the last audience if he could, and he would still main deck 4 of them if it was a 2-drop.
Wow.
Like, he said both of those things about this card.
That's crazy to me. I still hate that card, but I haven't played enough Sherry to really have that much of an opinion.
I played 2 of it at the ARG that I won, and I kind of wish I had a 3rd one. I don't know about 4. I definitely don't know about 5, but I do think that that card is better than I initially gave it credit for.
But so I think what sort of this comes back to is there is a certain extent, especially among the competitive players, to, like, they just play decks very conservatively. So short of something like a bigger banning than what we just had or a rotation, it's very easy for all of our competitive players to sort of roll into just roll in with what they already know, because they can do well with it. And let's say there is a hypothetical another deck. I don't think at the moment there is, but let's say there's a hypothetical another deck that's as good or a tiny bit better than Sherry. It's still so much easier for the competitive players to just take the Sherry that they already have experience on, is already still very good, and just update it a little bit and then roll. And you can see all that. All of them, everyone just brought Sherry and performed very well.
So my follow-up to this, right, is if we can assume that, like, almost no matter what, like, the top players are going to bring Scheherazade, and that's going to force Scheherazade to do well. If you look over at the European GP, I think there was, like, 4 Scheherazade in the top 8.
But Europe has just gone through a massive shift. You don't even have to do full move to cluster. If you just cut all the dual stones from the format right now, the shift would be massive. And they lost all the dual stones.
No. The New Frontiers GP, the Germany GP that happened this weekend was, like, not
I didn't know they had
dominated by Scheherazade. I don't have the exact numbers, but there was Lumia, there was Carrick, there was IU. I mean, the top, like, 4, I think, ended up being, like, 3 Scheherazade anyway, but, like, the top 16, and even just, like, the top 8, like, by seeding and, like, into actual bracket, was decently diverse.
You do realize our top 16 had a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, we had,
and
like,
in the top
time
16, we had
16.
combo decks, we had time-spinning witches, we had a couple more Carricks. We had, like, we had a lot of stuff.
It's kind of hard to, like, comparatively talk about metas when they cut to top 16 and we cut to top 8, and we do have a lot of more of our unique decks in top 8. Or top 16, rather.
But they're, like, top 8 by seeding. Like, I think first seed was actually, like, Lumia. And then, like, they had an IU, I think, was, like, 5th seed. Like, they did have, like, 3 or 4 different rulers that were up there. Like, in top 8 by seeding and top 8 by bracket.
Well, they also, the other thing is, like, they played more rounds. And it's kind of weird over here because, like, I mean, the pro players will start IDing like either the last round or the round before last, and it kind of screws up seeding going into top 8. But like if we played, I think they usually end up playing like 9 or 10 rounds over there, and then cut to top 16. If we played like 9 or 10 rounds, I'm sure our top 8 might be a little more diverse than just 6 Scheherezade as well.
Isn't that like the opposite of the point though? Like Scheherazade's the most consistent deck. If you play more rounds, Scheherezade should rise to the top, right? So
I mean, we also have less good players.
Well, no. So after watching the brackets, what would honestly have happened is, if you added a round 8 there, all of the Scheherezades end up in mirrors in round 8, and all of the other decks get to play each other and move up the seeds, while Scheherezades start kicking Scheherezades down the seeds.
Gotcha.
Like that's 100% would have happened.
Is that really how the math works?
I don't think it is.
Frank's arguing my point, so I'm going to say yes.
Like I was watching the brackets all day because I had to find matches for the stream.
All right. I guess my overall point with this, moving on to our next discussion topic, is Sherry really the problem? Like, I think Scheherezade is undoubtedly still a tier 1 deck, but does Scheherezade the ruler need to be banned for the meta to be healthy? Like that, like in America, we seem to be in a consensus where, yeah, like we are all playing Scheherezade. Scheherazade's the only thing topping, whatever. But in Europe, like Scheherezade won the European tournament. There was a GP in Indonesia where there was, I think, 4 Scheherezade in top 8, but then somehow Fair won the tournament through Scheherezade.
Yeah,
like, color me
I
surprised.
don't know about that.
I don't know how that happens, but Fair won the tournament. And then, like, you did have a pretty diverse top 8, top 16, but ultimately Scheherezade won Europe. Like, so is Scheherezade something that, like, the meta will develop answers to? Like, now that we know definitively that Scheherezade is the quote-unquote #1 deck, like, are there decks that can build to beat it? Because last meta, I think the answer was undoubtedly no. The deck had Ruin Stories, the deck had Evil Genie, it had a 2-mana 10/10, like, it just had too many things going well for it to, like, even conceive of what could stop it. But now, like, you kind of just take out Puppet Maker, and then you survive the Sherry flip, and then you've got, like, some playability. And, like, Time Spinning, which is a kind of playable deck, it did, I think, take at least 2 of the top 16 here in North America. Yep. So, like, is Sherry the problem? Like, does Sherry need to be banned? That's my question.
So I think Sherry is definitely a problem, even if the deck isn't strictly unbeatable or tier 0, or even if you were to not call it the best deck in format. I think that there is a lot of power in new players looking at the top 8 list and not seeing Scheherezade anymore. Like, I think that there is a lot that Scheherezade still being good has instilled a lot of doubt in the community's ability to trust the R&D team to do their job. I think that there's a lot of unrest because of that, and so I think that there's a sort of a step back meta reason that we should ban Scheherezade, just because I think it overall improves the experience of the game. And we've talked about before that Scheherazade's just kind of an oppressive ruler design anyway, kind of regardless of whether or not she's broken, so they should have banned her in the first place. But more to your point directly, I don't think Scheherezade is strong enough to actually get banned right now. I think that she does have answers that we're just not really addressing, and it's the kind of ruler that the more she does well, the more people will play things that actually genuinely beat her. And I do think those decks exist, and so hopefully we'll see them a little bit more out of Denver.
So my concern with Scheherezade, pretty much since she came out, has been Lorite. Because Lorite is a card that is extremely effective against every deck that I can conceive except for Scheherezade. And if you move into this, like, anti-Scheherezade meta, that means cutting down on Lorites. And then, like, these other decks can kind of come up in a Scheherezade meta. But once you take Scheherezade out of the picture, I think everybody's just main decking for Lorite. Because it's good against literally every deck that I can imagine, yeah. And, like, Gil being good scares me because, like, Gil is a deck that can just recycle their Lorite for... Honestly, I'm not sure why. I didn't even know lore-wise that card was related to Gil in any way, and all of a sudden that deck can just abuse it. But I think that like Scheherazade's natural resistance to Lorite, both within just her cards not really doing anything to it, but also just the fact that her flip is, you know, separated out into 3 separate abilities, just because of how the legend mechanic has to be worded. You know, I'm not a fan of it, and I'm a little worried of Lorite being a big issue if we take Scheherezade out.
Frank, you got anything to say about this topic?
I would like to see her go for somewhat similar reasons to what Brandon listed. I think it would do a lot to, like, comfort players. It would let us bring some interesting cards that I think are perfectly fair back in. Like, I would personally much rather just have everyone have access to Ruin Story than Sherry exist, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
But also, even if, and I having watched, I don't think it's impossible to build a deck that, like, beats the current Sherry options that are available. I don't think the incentive is there to do it. I think maybe, especially since we're at the end of a cluster, I like, you know, with we're this close to rotation and everything, I don't think there's any real incentive for a lot of people to be grinding beat Scheherezade.
So one of my concerns is if you want to build a deck that just beats Scheherezade, I think you can do it. But I think that deck is going to play a very small number of Lorites, and then the question is, can you beat Scheherezade, Keurig, Time Spinning Witch, and Gil? Because these aren't like, you know, these aren't like great decks, but they are decks that like you will see at a tournament, and you cannot afford to take a loss to if like your Scheherezade matchup isn't like 100%. And because just how the American meta always works out, people have a weird aversion to playing the best deck. You're not going to run into 7 rounds of Scheherezade. That's just not going to happen. Yeah. I think Alex said he only played 3 or 4 mirrors across the 7 rounds because people just don't want to be playing these decks. So if you build something that just beats Scheherezade, I don't think you're going to top an event with it.
Agreed.
I've been messing around a lot with like stuff that like strictly beats Scheherezade, and it's like been my thought experiment for the past week. The answer for you guys listening is 40 card Tree 2, but I did mess with a Charlotte deck that was not even green, and the idea was I play like Shades and other kill spells to kill Puppet Maker, so it never ever hits the board, they never get to draw cards. I play 4 Thought Control, 4 Glint of Insight, 4 Blazer Legendary Thief, so I'm always looking at your hand and making sure that you never have anything relevant. Most importantly, Lorite, so when my ruler flips and I get to draw 5 cards, and I've already gotten rid of all of your cards, then I've just got you dumpstered in card advantage and I can just kill you. And the problem with this idea, where I just run you out of cards and then I kill your board forever, was that Seed of Rebirth is a dumb card, and Seed of Rebirth attached to Lorite is like the single dumbest thing that I think I've ever encountered, because it means that if you are a deck that loses to Lorite, like how do you beat it, right? Like you discard it out of their hand if you don't want to be a green deck, or you play Fair Spell or like your own Lorite. But like you don't want to keep in Lorite against Scheherezade because they don't like have any like lordable abilities, like you were saying. But now anytime they get a Lorite engraved, like they can just activate their Scheherezade and then get a sorcery speed Seed of Rebirth to get back Lorite, but actually it's an instant speed and it cancels my draw 5 card split, which is my entire point of my ruler. Like it's like that, and Spirit Stones, being able to sack cards and then draw cards. It's like these generically powerful cards as well that just like push Scheherezade over the top, and it's just like, even when I think I have Sherry pegged dead to rights and I've got something that can like beat her consistently, it's like, oh, the deck just has natural answers that are disgustingly good against what I want to be doing.
I still tend to lean more towards like Aaron's opinion. Like I don't know that the list we had was ideal, but I know that like we sent Stephanie with basically a list that had a real good, like in testing, had a real good record against Scheherezade. And her record against Scheherezade during the event was good. And then she lost to a bunch of Keurigs.
So, okay, I'm not going to sit here and like rag on Stephanie at all, but like she lost to a lot of the things. She lost to a lot of the things that she thought she was going to lose to. And she lost to a Sherry, so I don't know exactly what you guys are talking about, because like she lost to one of the matchups she said was an auto loss, and she lost to the Sherry that you said was such a good matchup. So like I don't exactly know.
So I actually I dissected Steph's deck after she posted the list, and I figured out what it is. It's literally just a pile of cards that I said were bad out of the new set. Oh, okay. Steph loves to fight me on these things. She always tells me that I'm wrong about cards and their power levels, and she just built a 40-card deck of the cards I said were bad. So I figured it out.
There are some good things I like about her list. I don't like the fact that it's 4-color, but like I do understand. Okay, if you go turn 2 Gil, then suddenly they need to like final battle you for 22, and then like Schrodinger's observation is gonna end the game. So you need green, black, and white, and then okay, your time spinning, so you need blue. Okay,
I don't even like 4-color decks when I can play 10 dual stones, but to play a 4-color deck and then play 4 monocolor stones is just
mind-boggling. She only played 3 monocolor stones.
She only played 3 of the thing?
Yeah, but still, it's like
that's buck wild to me, but just like, for how often I watched her flip her ruler.
I did like the Red Elemental with Gil Lapis. So like Gil Lapis is a pretty good win condition in general. It's like good, well positioned against the field too. And then like being able to play the Red Elemental and like using your ruler's ability to produce the mana for the Red Elemental, like that's a cool trick. That's like, I like that a lot. I would have just loved to see that in a traditional TSW list with like Mosasaurus and stuff.
Right. Right, well that's the thing. So the Red Elemental I thought was genius. Like exactly. I actually hadn't even thought of that. And when I saw that in Stephanie's list, I was like, oh wow, this is the best Time Spinning Witch deck. And then I saw the rest of her deck and I was like, oh, this isn't a Time Spinning Witch deck. This is just cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, not going to talk about top 32 lists. But yeah, so Scheherezade
later.
Definitely being a problem deck. If we're not trying to ban Scheherezade, though, I feel like the deck, like I was saying, does play a lot of just like generically powerful cards that are almost impossible to beat if you are trying to anti-Scheherezade without like doing the very specific thing. So like my biggest offender is Final Battle. I was going to talk about Ray, but like there was almost no Ray in the Scheherezade lists that did top, and I think it's because it's so bad in the mirror. But like if the mirror isn't what you're trying to beat anymore, like Ray is super good against like random like anti-meta decks. Spirit Stone's kind of disgusting. Like the deck just has a lot of generic cards, but like
if I can say one last thing before we move on to Final Battle.
Sure.
I think the other problem with Sherry is that so there's a world of difference between formats where an aggro deck or a control deck are the best deck or approaching a tier 0 deck, and when a mid-range deck are. So, like, when an aggro deck is, you'll see it, like, it gets too fast and it edges out all the mid-range decks because they just aren't good enough to stabilize versus, or it edges out all the control decks because they just have no chance of stabilizing against something that good. But you'll still see a healthy amount of people, like, playing interesting mid-range decks that that at least do decently well. And when control decks are really good, you'll see a decent spread of aggro decks. Like, you'll see some other stuff, even if it edges out one archetype. But when mid-range is good, it kind of edges out both archetypes, because mid-range naturally preys on aggressive decks, and when it becomes too good, all of a sudden they can just focus and never lose to a control deck because they're naturally beating aggro decks. And that's sort of the problem we're in with Sherry, where, like, she's really good, and then the natural, like, combination of things she does makes it hard to, like, to have a meta built around her.
I can agree with that. I
That
do
was the
feel
end of my
like
stuff.
the best Scheherezade like decks that are good in the mirror are the slower variants. Like the more, like basically the less you're trying to beat Keurig, the more you're going to beat Scheherezade as a Scheherezade deck, and that's like why we saw Jean-Paul's list do so well, because he is playing like Millennia Bonds, which is playing extra copies of cancel spells. He's playing Blazer. He's just like playing a 4-drop that looks at your hand and is super sticky on the board. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, yes, I think the Millennia Bond actually went a long way into it. So I played at the ARG Connecticut a few weeks ago, before the new set and the bannings. I played Bug Scheherezade, and I felt like Millennia Bond was honestly a little bit better than Bear Magic in some of the matchups, because you just need something that negates Final Battle, and that's why even at ARG Atlantic City I chose to play Black-Green, and I still played a Final Breeze in the deck. If that card just said 2 mana, counter target Final Battle, I would still play that card.
Nope.
Oh, yeah.
100% agree.
As a matter of fact, I think that card would be better if it was 2 mana cancel target final.
And also, Jean-Paul's list is also a perfect example of the problem I'm listing. He took out everything that hypothetically would help him do well against an aggro match as a mid-range deck. He has no
he
early
played
mana ramp.
or Last Audience. That's a very good card against aggro.
Yeah, that and Bear Magic is like all you need.
But I mean, like, he doesn't. He specifically wasn't playing elves, even though that helps them get.
That's true.
That's a blocker, and it helps them get mana advantage to start double spelling with his card advantage.
He actually did lose to a Keurig in Swiss, right?
What?
That's my understanding.
No, he didn't lose anything in Quest. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying
mind.
that he took out the cards that you would expect to want as a mid-range deck to help keep up with an aggro deck or stabilize and take over, and he still stabilized and took over every single time. Like, from what he had told me. He didn't, like, not only did he not lose any, like, matches in Swiss, he didn't drop a game.
Yeah, of course.
And, like, just, like, that's a problem.
It's just hard for me to imagine a world where Scheherezade actually is capable of losing to Keurig, because they get to go, turn 1, pass, I have open Last Days with Powerless Dragonoid mana. You can't play Ground and Air Supremacy. Scariest thing you can do is play a, like, Howell Pig. And then maybe I'll take 4, but now I get to, like, my 2-drop is going to be my 6/6 that turns into an 8/8 when it's blocking. So, like, if you want to attack with your whole pick, I can just block it for free. And, like, your scariest turn 2 is Sylvia, but, like, Doll Audience, or not Doll Audience. Is it Doll Audience?
The Doll's period negates Sylvia.
Yeah, what's the 6/6 that turns into an 8/8? Like, that card just,
Doll
like...
Audience.
Oh.
Yeah, it just beats their turn 2. And then you've got, like, Bear Magic for, like, stabilizing once they start, like, building up their board and, like, playing multiple 1 and 2-drops in a turn. You've got Lorite for their flip. You've got... like, just so many things that just slow them down that, like, I don't even think you need to go, like, hard miscalc to beat Keurig, which is...
and that's sort of what I'm getting at. It's a mid-range deck that doesn't have to, like, not only doesn't have to try to, like, beat an aggro match where it's sort of supposed to be winning anyway, but, like, it can actively not try and focus on main, like, I mean, main deck, Millennia Bond is just awful versus Keurig, I'm fairly certain, and... he's absolutely not punished for it because his deck is just too good against it.
Yeah, I think that Scheherezade has like 20 to 25 cards that like you have to play, and then you really get to play with like those last 15 slots. Maybe I'm over exaggerating there. Maybe it's more like 34 cards you have to play in 6 slots. But basically, like those 34 cards are just so powerful and so good against so many different kinds of strategies. Like Scheherazade's power has always lied in her her versatility and just the amount of plays that you can make with her between the extra deck and the main deck, and having all your resonators have quick cast and drawing a bunch of cards. Like there's just nothing that any other deck can do, and I don't think that we're gonna find a world where Scheherezade is like a balanced ruler and like a solid tier 1 meta choice in a field of 4 other solid tier 1 meta choices.
The other thing I would note is look at all of the Scheherezade lists, and the only card I feel like they care that they're losing going into a rotation is Final Battle. And while that's a big card, that means that this deck is functionally already almost a cluster constructed deck that doesn't get hit by rotation.
Yes.
Yeah, we kind of saw the same problem with Fox going into last year's Worlds format, where like we got like Fair's spell, and I think we lost like people that were still playing the avatars lost the avatar, and I think one other card, and that was it.
Yeah, and like I feel like that's the problem we have with Scheherezade. Like, why, even though I think she's not necessarily bad enough to be unbeatable with the current setup, I think it's just a healthy choice to kick her out the door.
I certainly won't complain if they do. Like, I don't think there's anybody that, even if you don't think Scheherezade should be banned, I don't think anybody's gonna like complain about it if it happens.
I'm a little terrified that like certain decks will become oppressively powerful in their own right if Scheherazade's gone. Like Fair's my #1 like big enemy because I absolutely hate Fair. I think like
but the cards that Scheherezade uses to beat Fair survive banning her. Like
right, but
one of the biggest cards against Fair is still Laura.
In anything that's not Scheherezade. Right.
No, I'm talking about...
I am worried about Resuscitating Will becoming a big card if there is not a card that main decks Scarlet's Agony and all that kind of stuff.
Also, just like Fair's spell becomes less main deckable, so stuff like Resuscitating Will becomes very powerful. I think Keurig gets a lot of value out of that because they have such powerful 1-mana quick casts. Like,
see, I'm fine with the fact that Dispel is not being main decked. That's a card that is inherently a side deck card.
I don't like any card that costs 1 mana that has the word cancel on it, except Wall of Wind. That's like the only one I'm fine with. So like Fair Spell, Lorite, Severing Winds, I'm gonna count that because it costs 0. Like I just don't like any of those.
I agree with
that. Like what you're discussing, Ryan, like because like the card inherently cuts out an entire. It's not punishing a specific archetype. It's punishing a specific card type. This would be like if we had a 1-mana blanket removal spell, and it stopped people from playing creatures, and we were like, man, if we kill this deck, this will go to the sideboard, and people will start playing creatures again. That doesn't scare me. That sounds like something a format does.
Right. I wasn't like trying to say that like I don't want to like not main for Fair Spell. Like I like being able to main for Fair Spell and then like have them be good against the best deck in the format, and then also be good against like cheesy nonsense. And it's kind of annoying to like main less and then just not see them when you need them against cards like Resuscitating Will. But like I'm just kind of wondering, like, is Scheherezade like less of a problem if we start attacking cards like Final Battle and cards like Lorite? Like, are those just like generically powerful enough that when we take them out of the Scheherezade arsenal, suddenly like Scheherezade is a bit more manageable by other stuff? Because you look at the tier 2 decks, right? You look at Keurig, you look at Time Spinning Witch, you look at Gil. Like, they're not playing Final Battle. Like, Time Spinning Witch is playing Lorite because it kind of has to, but like Time Spinning Witch gets like disgustingly good if Lorite's banned, to the point where I don't think you can ban Lorite, which is like kind of why I wanted to center a discussion around Final Battle. Like, Lumia, I think, should be a pretty strong deck that's almost kept completely in check by Final Battle existing. So like, is that a card that could go? Like, does Scheherezade still do stupid Scheherezade things if Final Battle's gone? Or like,
yes.
I don't know.
I think there is enough other stuff they can do. Like, so like Scheherazade's like maybe it'll get a little bit weaker, but while Scheherazade's been able to lean on Final Battle, that's sort of been hiding the fact that I'm fairly certain we still have perfectly functional like responses to resonators and wide resonators, just not such knockout unstoppable ones.
I don't think we do. I can't name a single card that deals with my opponent going wide that isn't Final Battle.
Yes, we do. It's the last Thunderstorm. Oh yeah, that doesn't destroy your own board.
Yeah, let's say I need my board to be alive. Like, we finally get a one-sided board wipe and it costs 1 mana. Are you like, give me a 6-mana one-sided board wipe, right?
Right.
Like I can handle that.
Brandon, do you have something to say about that?
Also, wait.
I don't know. So banning Final
isn't...
Battle is an interesting discussion in terms of whether or not it's going to fix the meta. But I think that kind of like the same thing I said before, where we got to step back and look at community impact. Is that really something that's going to please a lot of people? And this is something that I don't think that you're really going to get away with banning Final Battle. I think a lot of people consider Final Battle an answer to Scheherezade too, right? Because, I mean, you talk about decks that go wide and do a lot of things. Like, you play Doll Master, you play a bunch of other dolls, you draw a card. I think a lot of people think of Final Battle as the answer to that. So, like, I don't know.
I mean, the other argument is, like, Final Battle's
removal spells.
Final Battle's gone in 2 months anyway. Like, I wouldn't...
Right, they're that too.
I'd be very surprised if they do an emergency ban, I'd be very surprised if Final Battle, like, made the cut when it's gone so soon anyway.
So one of my...
You were also talking...
Go ahead.
You were talking about Lorite getting banned, making time spending witch too good. I feel like there are so many rulers that I've said, oh, if Lorite was banned, this deck would be so good. Like Seal. Seal might be...
I want a functional Lorite reprint that, like, costs a reasonable amount of mana and maybe doesn't do all those things.
Sure.
And isn't a resonator. I feel like resonators are a lot easier to get back from your graveyard than spells are, and I would rather see like a spell that is like 2 or 3 mana that's like cancel target or activate or automatic ability. Period. Like don't cantrip me. Just 2 mana spell that does that. We're good.
Right. I think Lorite's probably just a little bit too oppressive, but
1 mana.
I think that
I leave 1 mana open on accident. Right? Like that's not even. That's my problem with 1 mana counter spells. Is like I feel like if you're gonna play counter cards, like it needs to be punishing for you. Like it needs to slow you down on tempo so that you can leave that mana open to respond to your opponent's actions. And instead, like it's like, oops, I left a mana open because that's just how my curve worked out. I guess I get a Lorite you, and then I have Severing Winds in you if you try to counter it because that card exists.
I think that if we're going to try to ban something other than Sherry to fix Sherry, I think I would just take the risk on Lorite. I understand it unlocks a lot of things, but I think it unlocks enough things that they'll kind of fight with each other and all kind of oppress Scheherezade. Although all of this is just kind of a silly discussion because we should just ban the ruler herself.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that like maybe Scheherezade decks like change significantly like in the overall goal of beating other Scheherezade decks when Final Battle's not there anymore, because like how do you like win the Sherry mirror if you're not Final Battle? You have to force them to flip first. Like how does that like change the deck? And then also like Lumia becomes playable. I think Fair becomes like passable, because right now like Fair can't ever beat Scheherezade because they have a guaranteed copy of Last Days, and then you flip, you lose all your counters, and then you get Final Battled, and that's the end of the game every single time. So I think like Fair being potentially viable and like Scheherezade like having weirder mirrors kind of just shakes up the meta enough, but I don't hate banning Scheherezade either, but I'm going to beat it with my 40-card Tree 2 deck, so don't worry, guys. Anyway.
Alright, I'll see you in Boston.
So last topic, the fun topic. Brandon, if you want to go ahead and introduce this one, since it was your idea for the poll. Oh, we have to talk about the last week's poll. Let me refresh the page.
Oh yeah, that I have to type.
Oh, that's right.
That is correct. So the winner from last week is actually a 3-way tie between Jeremy, Brandon, and I. So AJ, I'm going to read off to you these replacements of dual stones for the new Valhalla cluster, and you pick your favorite one. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah.
So one of them is an idea of a countdown stone for every color. So basically the current Vingolf 3 stones that we have, but instead of like only having like 1 color combination for each, or like, you know, like a base red secondary black stone, it would be like 2 of them, right? So you would have base red secondary black, base black secondary red. So then you would deal away 8 stones like that, 1 of every color.
Gotcha.
Next we've got charge stones. So a charge stone is a basic stone, or a single color stone that comes into play. You can tap the charge stone to create a counter. You can only put on 1 counter at a time, so if it already has a counter, you can't do it again.
I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, and then when you remove a counter, produce any 5 color, right?
Okay.
And then last but not least, search stones. So when this special magic stone enters the battlefield, you can search your deck for any basic stone and put it on top of your magic stone deck, and that stone would just tap for any color. So you have a red stone, blue stone, white stone, black stone, green stone that all have this ability. So when they enter the battlefield, put a basic stone on top of your deck. And those are the 3 different stones to replace dual stones if we're not getting functional dual stones again.
Gotcha.
So which of those would be the winner in your mind?
I would much prefer the first option, to just have the current Vingolf iterations with the 2 of each counters to produce the second color of mana. Those are my favorites.
All right. Well, Jeremy unfortunately isn't here for this podcast, but he is the winner from last week.
Wait,
AJ,
can I tell you guys what my idea is for Duel's next format?
Sure. I'm going to force a tie.
Okay. Oh yeah. Frank wasn't here last week either, so.
Oh no.
I would go with the fetch stones. I think that Aaron is underestimating how awful 10 stones that have a die on each are.
That does sound
I saw
terrible.
multiple players who only had 2 of those in their deck, and were like actively hating the fact that they had to have dice out.
Whatever. Anyway, so my idea for next format, right? You reprint all Duel stones.
Okay.
That's a great
do
idea.
not have green on them.
Oh, okay. That's.
Oh.
Yeah.
You don't give green any Duel stones.
It's probably still the best color.
Because I'm a little interested about what's going to happen next format, because like black-red has a like true duel and nobody else does.
That is true.
Like black-white almost has one. That has like half a duel stone. Green-black doesn't have a duel stone, but black-red just has a true duel, and that's my favorite color combination, so I'm excited for next format. Y'all gonna see me bringing some shit back from the graveyard with some red cards in it.
I could also see a cycle of pain duels working nicely. Like basically just making a full cycle out of the null stone.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Make Killing Stone great again.
God.
Isn't this like just so much worse than the Moonlight Stone that like pays 2 to tap for anything?
Yes, but because we don't have the Moonlight Stone.
No, because this one produces painless single color. So like the current one produces black with no qualms, and then you pay for the other color. And I mean a full cycle like that, where it basically you get to play single color decks very easily, and then get progressively punished as you get greedier on colors.
Alrighty.
Gotcha.
Well, Brandon, if you want to introduce our topic for this week, go ahead and.
Sure. So basically, the fun topic is pick any ruler in New Frontiers currently that is not Tier 1 or not competitively viable, and make it viable. So whichever ruler you wish was good, make it good, and if you want, you can talk about kind of what you would do to make it good. Like, what would you print more support for it? Would you get rid of things that are currently oppressing it? What would you do to make it good?
Okay,
I can go first if we want to give an example.
Yeah, go ahead, because I've got an idea. I'm looking at them right now, but I got to figure out what I would do.
So I would definitely pick Flute. So I love Flute. When Flute was first spoiled, it's a ruler that says tap, draw a card. Like, that's just my jam. The format is unfortunately just that kind of, you need a ruler that does something, and her backside doesn't really do enough right now. I was really hoping when we got the cracks artifacts that they tap for any color. You filter one and then draw a card, time spinning which plays it. I don't remember what it's called. But I thought that would be good in Flute. You sack them all, you flip Flute, you get them all back. There's an effect in Magic called Second Sunrise it's banned in Modern. It's very similar to what Flute's backside does. So I'd print more cheap blue creatures that sacrifice themselves for effects, so you can play a bunch of them, sack them all, get effects, flip Flute, get them all back. You probably have to get rid of Final Battle for this to be effective, and maybe just slow down the format a little bit.
To not break color identity, wouldn't you just print more things like the Life-Stealing Altar instead? Because sacking themselves to do stuff isn't really blue, but Life-Stealing Altar is exactly what you just described.
Sure, so like blue creatures that have like on-death effects.
That could also work.
Alright, I dig it, yeah.
Sure. Alrighty.
Anybody else got one offhand ready to go?
Yeah, alright, so mine is Swordsman of Fire, Dimension Brigades Leader Adelbear, the Wanderer ruler. So I like this guy a lot, but first things first, give him mana fixing for Wanderer on both sides. Right. The other thing is, instead of, so for those of you that aren't familiar with what he does, he flips for 4, he energizes for red. You can play any color mana to play Wanderer Resonators, and Wanderer Resonators you can control gain first strike, and then on his backside, when you play a colored Resonator, he gets a bunch of different effects when they enter the field. You know, varying in skill, green actually isn't the best one. But what I would want to do is, I would want to make Wanderer Resonators cost 1 less, which the only Wanderers that have a generic cost attached to them are the Black-White Gil Lapis, the Black-Blue Valentina, and I believe there's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I think like a 2-mana Gil Lapis is actually a pretty good card. Anybody that's like tried to play that in a deck will understand that, like that. Oh, and Blackheart Alice, that's a big one. So like having a 2-mana Gil Lapis and a 3-mana Blackheart Alice, and then the black and white effects are like I think black is your opponent discards a card, and then white is this card, put 2+1/+1 counters on this card. And when he enters the field, he puts a Wanderer from your hand into the field. So like the black-blue Valentina would, like, your opponent would discard a card and you draw a card. And I think if you could do, like, maybe make him cost a little bit less than 4 to Judgment as well, maybe give him a 3 cost.
3.
And I think that would actually put him, maybe not in line with, like, Scheherezade and stuff like that, but I definitely think it would make him more of a contender.
Yeah,
there you go.
See that. Frank, you got an idea in the back of your head there?
I have an idea, but it's not quite finished yet if you want to go first.
I don't, so I'm still looking at all the rulers in this head.
So,
I forgot to prepare.
my choice for ruler is Freyla.
Freyla.
She's a ton of fun. Dark Elf Tribal does a lot of cool stuff. Dark Elf Tribal does a lot of cool stuff, and then, like, she's actually just been, like, the decks around her have been, like, pretty solid and fun, just not really GP worthy. So I would love to see a change that would make her, like, more viable. And I'm trying to figure out what that is. And, like, part of me almost wonders if it's not just making some of her effects cheaper. But if anyone has any ideas on how to make her better,
You could also just print better Dark Elves.
Yeah, that would help.
Like, I mean,
I could use some better Wanderers as well.
there you go.
I guess she could still use a bigger, like, top end Dark Elf, like, because when
when she enters, she just pulls a Dark Elf out of the yard, right?
yes,
So
she
like,
pulls a Dark Elf out of the yard.
like,
you
a
can pay to give her
6-mana
swiftness,
Dark Elf,
and you
that
can
would be...
pay to do 100 damage to your opponent for each Dark Elf you control.
So it'd be really fun if they gave you like a 6-mana Dark Elf that like does something ridiculous, and you could like play the one that puts a Dark Elf from your deck into the yard,
Yeah.
and then Turbo Judge and then get big dude, maybe.
Gotcha.
I guess you could also make her butt bigger so that she survives more stuff.
Oh, I thought you meant literally, because that would make her a tier 1 ruler in my mind.
Obviously.
Alrighty.
I guess. Oh wait, there is one other thing you could change to make her much more impactful. She currently, when she attacks, she gives a target Dark Elf +4/+4 in swiftness. If they don't print a giant Dark Elf, you could simply make that Dark Elf overrun. All of your Dark Elves get +4/+4 in swiftness whenever she attacks.
Oh, when you said Overrun, I thought you were about to give Pierce. Because that's what Overrun does in Magic. But,
I mean, we could also do Pierce. I can go either way. But just, like, make her a giant, like, her attacking a giant fucking pot of damage. Crap, I broke our swear jar. We were so
AJ
good.
came in here and smashed it first, so
I'm sorry.
body mouth. Alright, so my ruler is going to be the Monkey King born from stone. AKA the Great Sky Sage Son Wukong. I really like this ruler just because he has an ability that says pay mana, draw cards, and I love drawing cards, even though his cards aren't super good. But I think that, like, the 4-cost Judgment is a significant limiting factor because he does feel like a very J-ruler-centric kind of thing. So I wanted the Judgment for, like, 2 mana. And I think that 2 mana seems like a little bit cheap, but given how, like, powerful the 3 mana rulers are, I think 2's kind of fine. And you don't really want to flip them, like, on turn 3 because you want to, like, search your flying clouds. So I just think, like, having him flip for 2 and then, like, having more mana to play with as you flip him would make him pretty playable. And then on his J-ruler side, I would like to see him not only be able to search your deck for a card named Xiao Wujing and Zhu Baiji, but I would like to also have the option of either searching your deck for Xiao Wujing and or Zhu Baiji, or you can play both Xiao Wujing and Zhu Baiji from your hand. So the condition here would be they have to both already be in your hand for you to get the enter ability to play them both. I think that would, like, make it, like, interesting deck building wise and how many copies you play. Maybe even see more playability out of, like, the one-mana. Oh, they're myths, aren't there? They don't even Wanderers. Darn it, never mind. But, like, if you want to flip and, like, get that extra powerful enter ability, which is similar to, like, a Thayer enter ability, where you're just, like, putting guys on the board, like, they both have to be in your hand. You can't just have one. And if you don't have them both in your hand, you get to search them from your deck anyway. So I think that would kind of just make him a really cool, like, almost Thayer type ruler, where he is, like, centered around, like, flipping, but he also plays slower instead of just, like, playing elves and spamming and just, like, doing stuff. Like, he just has this passive flying cloud ability, but then he's, like, a control ruler with, like, a dope win condition, right? Where you're just, like, sitting around drawing flying clouds all game, waiting to get your Xiao Wujing and your Zhu Baiji, and then you flip, and then you got, like, a 20/20, and then these 2 other guys along with him, and he can end the game by himself. That's kind of what I would want to see out of him.
One of those 2 resonators gives him swiftness, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, check this.
That's pretty good.
For
And they
Wukong,
both give
instead
him
of that,
+2/+2, I believe.
Yeah.
you give Wukong Grimoire 5 and the ability the dolls in your hand gain quick cast.
I see,
and
I see.
0, reveal a face stand. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, but he still costs 4 to judgment.
Damn it. That'd be fair. I think 3 cost. I think I'm looking forward and evaluating cards. Anytime a card costs 3 to flip, I'm just gonna be like, all right, this card's broken.
Yeah.
Because I think all the 3-card flip cards are just broken.
I mean, every single ruler from...
The only ones I can think of are Scheherezade and Feyer, but...
Yeah, it's just the basic
Lumia.
5 and then Scheherezade, right? Yeah. And Gil and Feyer. Yep.
So it's rulers that flip for 0 and rulers that flip for 3 that we need to worry about?
Yeah, the 1 and 2 ones don't matter. Like, Flute's a joke, Zero's a joke, Prissia, Bitchmaid.
I mean, the 2-mana rulers are kind of tier 2. Like, Ayu is a 2-mana flip, Time Spinning Witch is a 2-mana flip.
Yeah, well,
Prissia is
Time
a 2-mana
Spinning Witch
flip.
isn't really a 2-mana flip.
Imel is a 2-mana flip.
She can be a 2-mana flip.
Wait,
Try hard and believe in yourself.
Time Spinning is a 2-mana flip. Like, you need 2 of the stone.
But I mean... yeah, okay, but like, yeah.
We should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose.
So, once again, just go around the table. Brandon, what is your ruler and how do you want to fix it?
The Dragon Shrine Maiden and the Princess of Time Flute.
Alright, Frank?
Freyla, the Revolutionary, and either print a big 6-mana Dark Elf worthy of reanimating a bunch of times, or make her backside trigger pump all your Dark Elves.
Gotcha. AJ? Aaron?
Mine was Swordsman of Fire, Dimension Brigade's leader Adelbear, and I wanted to replace the first strike with Wanderers, costing 1 less, and give him a cheaper judgment cost.
And I want to fix the Monkey King born from Stone / Wukong by making him Judgment for less, and also giving him the option to have a Feyer type enter ability of cheating in guys from hand. Alrighty, well, I think that just about wraps it up then. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Once again, this has been The Ruler School with Brandan Bremont,
Bye-bye.
Frank Closser,
Later.
Aaron James Miles,
That's my name.
and me. Alright, guys, take it easy.